Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. How are you all? This is Mr. Sigler speaking, and I'm calling you on today's phone, on today's YouTube clip, to talk about Passover. Yes, Passover. I know that you see it back. The holiday of freedom, the holiday of spring, the holiday where we have no bread and no cookies and no donuts and no nothing because it's chametz. What is chametz? What are we doing on Passover? So first of all, we gotta start with the story of Passover. So when you read this, you will know. The story of Passover started when the Israelites were in Egypt. By the way, why they were in Egypt? Because Joseph went down to Egypt because his brother put him in a pit, remember? And they were taking him, and he went down to Egypt, and the Israelites came after him. Why? Because there was a famine in Israel, and the Israelites went over there, and they stayed over there for a generation. At the beginning, all well good. There was a good Pharaoh. Pharaoh was the king of Egypt, by the way. There was a good Pharaoh. He stayed over there. He helped them, and they all were living happily ever after. But then years go by, the Israelites grew bigger and bigger. They lived in a section that is called Goshen. That's the name of the place. And they become a bigger nation. And then came one Pharaoh that said, hey, they're overwhelming us. Maybe we should do something about it. So first of all, he was putting all the Israelites to slavery. And they were working and building and doing all the things that needed to be done in Egypt. So slavery came upon the Israelites. But not just that. This Pharaoh saw that the Jews are multiplying or like getting a lot bigger, and slavery wasn't enough for him. So Israel was afraid that something is going to happen. And what he did is throw to the river each male that was born, because then he said they will not have any male. And first of all, male are stronger than female usually, not always, don't jump on me, but he was afraid that they will mutiny him at some point, so he was trying to make less and less from them. So one family didn't want to go through with it and put her baby in a crib. You probably know the story. They sent this crib on the Nile River hoping for something to happen. This crib was going on the Nile River, and at some point Pharaoh's daughter found the crib. She took it in and she called the baby Moses. In Hebrew, Moshe. Why is that important? Why is it in Hebrew? Because Moses, Moshe in Hebrew, means you took it out of the water. Limshot in Hebrew means to take out of the water. So she took him out of the river and called him Moshe. Moshe grew up with a brother that was the real son of Pharaoh, and Moses was like an adopted son. So he grew up over there, and at some point, when he grew up and he became bigger, Pharaoh actually liked Moses more than his brother. But Pharaoh wasn't willing to give his kingdom yet. But at some point, he needed to decide if it will be Moses or it will be Pharaoh. Even though Moses wasn't his son, but he was the preferred one. Moses walked one day in the land of Egypt and saw one of the servants of Egypt, one of their soldiers, whipping an old servant because he couldn't work anymore and he was tired, and he was like, you go to work. So Moses confronted this soldier, and while they were negotiating, they pushed each other, and they were on a high level, and Moses pushed him and he fell and died. Moses buried him and hoped that nobody will see it. At some point, one woman met Moses at the street and told him that he is an Israeli. He didn't believe her because he wasn't there. He was a baby when he was taken. So Moses grew up and as a Pharaoh, as an Egyptian. He didn't believe he's an Israelite. So he went to his palace back and he was like, thinking about it. And he said it to his mom, and the mom who wanted that her son, the real Pharaoh, to be the Pharaoh, told him that he's right. And when he heard that, he asked his dad, and his dad said he couldn't hide from him the truth, but he said to him, "You're still my son." But Moses, he couldn't handle it anymore. So he ran away into the desert. He lived in the desert for quite a while, married a woman named Zipporah, and one day his lamb disappeared. So he was looking for his lamb, and he found a burning bush. But it wasn't burnt. It was like just the fire, but not the burn itself. So he found the burning bush, and he didn't understand what's going on. So suddenly a voice came. "Moses, take your shoes from your legs because you're in a holy place." And God was speaking to Moses, asking him to go and save the Israelites. Moses didn't want to go. He didn't think he's the guy for that. But he went anyway. So he went to Egypt and confronted his stepbrother, actually, because the old Pharaoh had died by now. So he said to him, "I need you to let the Israelites go." And Pharaoh said, "It will never happen, Moses, because they are good workers and I don't want to send them away." So Moses threw his staff on the floor to show Pharaoh that he means business. And the staff twisted and became a snake. Pharaoh was impressed. He called his magicians as well. They threw their staff on the floor as well, and they became snakes as well. But there were two snakes. And Moses' snake attacked those two snakes and ate them whole. Pharaoh wasn't impressed. He said, "I'm not letting them go. Not with whatever magic you'll do over here." So Moses went away. God told Moses to go to the river of Niles and touch his staff on the water. And that's what he did. And the water in all Egypt became red. And that starts the first plague. After this plague, Moses asked Pharaoh, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh said, "No, I won't." So then came the second plague. And it was lice. It was frogs, sorry. And frogs were all around the land of Egypt. And it was frogs everywhere. And they were jumping. And they were attacking them. And it was the worst for Pharaoh. And then came the third plague, because Pharaoh didn't release the Israelites yet. So they came the third. And the third was lice. Well, I'm bald, so I don't have lice on me, but think about lice everywhere on the bed, on your hand, and things like that. And it wasn't nice. But still, Pharaoh didn't want to release them. So then came the fourth plague. Wild beasts. And the wild beasts were everywhere. They were attacking, they were eating people, but Pharaoh was stubborn. He didn't let them go. And then came the fifth plague. It was the plague of the cattle. And the cattle died by this plague. So there were no cattle. But Pharaoh was still stubborn. And then came the sixth plague. And it was boils. It like boils all over the body. It was the worst. And the people of Egypt started complaining to Pharaoh. But Pharaoh was stubborn and he said no. And then came the seventh. And then it was hail. And hail fall from the sky. Some say that this hail had fire in it. It fell from the sky onto the earth, and it was devastating. But still, Pharaoh was stubborn. He will not let the people go. And then came the eighth. And the eighth was locust. Locust all over the land. And they eat all the crops. And Pharaoh and his Egyptians almost had no food left because the locusts were everywhere. But still, he was stubborn. Some say that God made his heart stubborn in order for him to make all the plagues. And then came the ninth plague, and it was darkness. Nobody could have seen anything. And it was so dark that it was crazy. And still Pharaoh was stubborn. And then Moses came to God and said, what are we doing? We did all those plagues. And God told Moses, go to your people. Tell them to put on the doorpost blood, and everything will be fine. Tell them to get ready, because tomorrow they're leaving Egypt. And that's what Moses did. And on that night, there was a fog that came all over the land of Egypt. And whatever door that there was no blood of a sheep on the doorpost, the fog went in and it struck the firstborn. And people were shouting and crying everywhere because every house in Egypt was struck by the death of the firstborn. And Pharaoh had a son as well. And his son has died as well. So Pharaoh was devastated. And when Moses came to ask him, he said, go away, Moses. Take your people and go. And the Israelites went out of Egypt. But sometime later, Pharaoh understood that he made a mistake. He doesn't want to let those Israelites go. So he ran after those Israelites with the chariots. And those Israelites were in the desert and they reached the Red Sea. And of course the Israelites were crying to Moses, what have you done? We're stuck over here. You led us to die. And Moses struck the sea, and the water opened into two walls of water. And the Israelites moved in the middle and moved to the other side. And when the chariots of the Egyptians came, they were trying to run after them, but Moses stroked the water, and the water clashed on the Egyptians, drowning them in the Red Sea. Moses and the Israelites moved into the desert and moved toward Israel. Stories of the desert are a lot to tell, but it's for a different day. So enjoy the stories of the Passover. And I want to tell you that you will need to read, again, this packet. You will need to read all the packet that we have over here, and you will need to answer questions on the last pages, 130 and 131. Now listen, you can take it easy and don't read everything at one point. We will do a Blooms meeting on Thursday, and on this Blooms meeting you will get the time. It will be, I think, somewhere around 5:30, and we will talk about the Passover. We will talk about all kinds of things over here. So there's no rush to do the questions right now. On Thursday, when we'll meet, we'll talk about it. You can do it. If you think you can do it and you don't need to wait, do it. It's not a problem. But we will talk about more traditions and more things that we have on Passover. Enjoy your time, stay safe, and we will meet on Thursday, and then I will give you the next part of Passover. Have a good day.